going to talk to Steve Hawkins, who's the Horizon ETF CEO. Steve, welcome back.
James, thank you for having me again.
And Steve, I want to jump right into the idea that Jeff Sessions' resignation, alongside the incremental deprohibition in an additional few states, Utah and North Dakota, I believe it was, is that...
Missouri.
Is it Missouri?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, another one. There was a recreational legalization.
Okay, right. But is this incremental move towards deprohibition broadly in the United States going to have a negative impact on the ability of Canadian companies to maintain the momentum and market caps they've achieved because they've been the exclusive owners of this opportunity pretty much since the U.S. has been all tangled up in this?
Yeah, I mean, in the short term, for sure, there's going to be zero impact to Canada. I mean, we still have to see an act of God through Congress before recreational gets approved or even medical gets approved at a federal level in the U.S., right? I mean, as of the election last night, I guess Congress could be a little bit more friendlier on an overall basis. And now that there's only 2 states where marijuana is not approved in some way, shape, or form, that's just going to be a continued help because this is a motivation of the people. This is not a motivation of the government in trying to enact marijuana from a legalization perspective, whether it be recreational or just medical. And we see this. This is an iceberg. It's moving very, very slowly. Sessions was probably one roadblock in the grand scheme of things because we knew that he was extremely dead set against any sort of marijuana legalization at the federal level. But with Sessions now resignation, hot off the news, that's one less stumbling block. But Trump is still not a supporter of marijuana, publicly. And, so we'll have to see. But, really, this is a Congress thing, and there's going to be a lot more pressure on Congress. But then ultimately, Trump still has the right of veto for anything, right? So.
Right. He also has the potential to, sweepingly sweep prohibition aside by executive order.
In theory. But
okay, so in terms of the election results and Jeff Sessions' resignation, has this had any impact on your thinking as it pertains to the management of the HMMJ ETF?
I mean, really, we're stuck with following sort of federal rules from who can invest in. And that's the TMX's rule with respect to our ability to invest in companies in the marijuana space. You're not going to see any U.S. company or U.S. operating companies list on the TMX. You're not going to see any of the TMX companies because of the election change the way they're doing business in the U.S. They basically have a prohibition on doing business in the U.S. Right now, I think we're still going to see a number of U.S. companies still come to Canada for its capital markets access, listing on the TSE, listing on Equitas, raising capital in our markets because our banking system is more favorable from a rules perspective, and our exchanges and ability under securities law, provides the ability landscape for these American companies to still raise capital here. But I loved the ad in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago, basically saying, the American pot companies, you are giving the Canadians this great competitive advantage, Mr. Trump. Why are you doing this? Right. And please help us out, right? And it was, and that's not going to change. Right. We've got boots on the ground in so many countries from our various Canadian companies. We're building out operations already over there. And all of these American companies are just sitting there on their hands, twiddling their thumbs, don't know what to do themselves. They got these stockpiles of cash. They can raise more cash if they want to, and they could very, very easily go overseas, except for this complete prohibition on, leaving the state, with respect to the way they do business. They can't bank overseas or anything, right? So
interesting. So in some respects, the fact that it's state by state is a boon to operators within the state in that it creates barriers to entry from outside of state competitors. Yeah. But in the broader picture, it's very much a negative because they can't actually take this whole operation on the road on an international basis.
They can't even put it in a truck and drive it over the border. They have to create a completely separate operation on a state by state basis, which is crazy when you think about it, right? But that's that is the competitive advantage that the Canadians have been given through Mr. Trump and the federal rules there. And you know, I think we're going to continue to see a lot of expansion outside of Canada from Canadian companies over this year. So it's not just, you know, backfilling the Canadian recreational demand, which has been, you know, has been building, and you know, we're undersupplied at the moment. They'll be backfilling that from a production perspective, but we're going to be continuing to expand outside of the U.S. You know, the Auroras, the Cannabis, the Cronoses, you know, all these guys have very, very active activities outside of Canada.
Sure.
And that's going to continue to grow substantially. And that's going to replace a significant part of their future revenues.
Sure. I've seen a couple of PowerPoint presentations recently. One was by a company that is proposing to grow on 100,000 hectares or acres, I can't remember which, in the DRC. And another one which was going to grow on multiple jurisdictions in African countries that would best be considered as dubious at best from a political stability perspective on, you know, 50,000 acres here, 100,000 acres there. It's like, do these companies really represent potentially a threat to the supply of CBD and THC as extracts on a global basis?
Yeah, I find all that very interesting to hear about, and extremely skeptical on how that's going to affect those companies from a going forward basis. I mean, you look at gold companies operating in Guyana and stuff like that, right? I mean, there's just, it's a completely different set of rules there. You know, how many warlords do you have to pay to, you know, be able to move your trucks from here to there? You know, I just, for me, it's really a focus on the countries where you see medical already being fully adopted. You see the governments on side, from like Germany as an example, where, you know, the German government through the prescription plan will pay for your CBD oil, you know, and that type of thing. That benefit, you know, why do you need to go into countries where it is so unconventional and skeptical from a, or sketchy would be maybe a better word to think about it.
I've seen, you know, even Afria has gone and made, you know, a lot of fanfare about this deal with Lesotho, which is a tiny little African kingdom within South Africa. Yeah. And it's like, well, you know, I just look at that and I'm thinking, why? Like, why would you dilute the power of your message by, you know, putting a footprint in such a sort of esoteric,
I don't even know why
place.
They press release something like that.
Exactly. It's like, wouldn't you not want people to know that you're going to get your stuff from Lesotho? But anyways, I could be wrong. I've not been to Lesotho. Have you been to Lesotho?
I'm south of there, but not there.
Okay, right. Okay, so then let's talk about, you know, the potential of these large hemp-based cannabis farms that are theoretically going to start appearing in the U.S., as I know, for example, Kentucky is moving towards legalizing industrial hemp on large-scale productions to, you know, to capture the economic opportunity inherent in CBD extracts in the state of Kentucky, or I guess nationally once that prohibition is removed. Do these, you know, big, huge operations in good jurisdictions represent a threat to the price of cannabis that, you know, all of these LPs rely upon in order to deliver results in balance sheets going forward?
Yeah, I personally don't believe so. I still think that there's still so many significant constraints to the way they operate their businesses that if there's any touch in any way, shape, or form of illegal operations under the federal rules, they're not going to be able to do things that they want to do and it affects their entire business. So if you're dealing with one state represented company, it's really going to be focused only on that state. You don't see these companies going out and listing on the NYSE right now or the NASDAQ Stock Exchange because they can't do it. You don't see the Morgan Stanleys and the Citibanks and the State Streets going ahead and helping back these from a capital markets perspective or just from a day-to-day operations perspective because they can't. They're just so highly focused on being 100% crystal clean. There's just no way that they're going to affect the way that our Canadian companies do business any time in the near future.
Interesting. So, what about the growers who are growing it biologically through biosynthetic means?
I think that's probably the single biggest risk to the physical growers out there, right? I mean, there's so much medical research going on right now with respect to production, with respect to extraction, with respect to the different stages in between the whole production cycle. And, most of the big producers right now have partnered with a university who are doing research for them in some way, shape, or form to help specifically help them on the extract basis or whatever. But these universities are also working with these synthetic producers. So you have the companies out there like Insys who are creating synthetic CBD specifically, who are direct competition. Like, they don't like marijuana producers, and marijuana producers don't like them.
Right.
But they're both producing CBD in some manner, shape, or form. And I think, they're just looking for really FDA adoption of those. They're well into their drug phase testings in all of the different, with the GWs, the Insys, the Zenerbas out there, and the synthetic CBD testing. They're well down the line. They're ready to go to production if they can get through the final FDA approval processes. And that's changing all the time. And I don't know that they can produce it on the same mass scale that we'll be able to physically produce cannabis plant, but they will be able to definitely compete with us at the end of the day. But, I mean, there's been how long did it take for sort of synthetic tobacco to really come to stage in, vapes and things like that for people to use? It was a very, very, very long time, right? True. But it's taken a very, very quick adoption over the past year and a half, 2 years, right? So I would say the same thing could potentially happen in the cannabis market, but that they're only going to really be able to deliver it in one or two different ways of systems of delivery. At this stage with the physical plant, we're still looking at so many different possibilities on how we can deliver that to you, and they're not all approved here in Canada right now, right? It's really just the plant and the oil, and a year from now we'll see edibles come online, and when vape happens, I don't know, but these are all stages of growth with respect to this fantastic new industry that we're all living in, and it's going to be fun to watch.
Sure. Okay, so finally, I'm curious as to what your assessment of the performance of the recreational regime's legalization on October 17th. Almost universally, the country ran out of legal cannabis. And, my own personal experience was I ordered on October 17th. I got it the day before.
You've got it already?
I got it the day before yesterday. Yeah. And so.
Lucky you. Yeah. One of the few.
Well, and I actually gave most of it away last night to friends and everything. Actually, I'm wondering if that's legal now. But
don't put that on tape and cross the border.
Right. Well, that's because I don't smoke it. I certainly wouldn't smoke it.
You gave it all away.
That's right. Yeah, I gave it all away. But so what was your takeaway from that? Has that affected your opinion of any of the Canadian sector or the potential in terms of the performance of the government operated outlets as well as the privately operated outlets?
I mean, every one of the producers that we talk to, basically really tell us the whole distribution channel, because of the provinces really controlling the rules around the distribution, and it's different in every province. They've screwed this up royally from an implementation perspective. None of them could agree on a way to do things. Each of the company had to talk to the regulators in each province separately about how can I do this and how can I do this, and so it really, really disrupted the distribution channel. The production was there, and they did have product, right? They just didn't know how they could get it to you at the end of the day. They couldn't pop up a shop on October 18th and go out there and sell it to you.
Right.
So, all in all, the distribution channel was really, really messed up to start. It has started to work itself out. They've started to figure out the bugs in the different provinces. The product is coming online from making it more available for you, and we'll see things continue from there. But really, I don't think the disruption is what affected the price on October 17th. Marijuana stocks generally had a very, very nice build up to October 17th. There was a lot of buying on rumor. There was a lot of buying on just what's going to happen with the place. But it's kind of like an iPhone. When Apple announces they're launching a new iPhone, there's a huge buildup in the stock price. As soon as it launches, stock tanks, right? That's just, there's no different from that in the way we looked at it. You know, we had a 35% sell-off in most of the marijuana stocks after October 17th, but now we've seen almost like a 20% retracement of that, including today, where it's all almost 10% today. So, you know, it's, again, this is not something that you want to invest in for the faint of heart. You have to make sure that your pacemakers batteries are charged up, and you can go on, you can buy your stock, and you can move on, you know. But there's a lot of day traders out there as well, right? So I look at it as a long-term investment play. Okay.
Steve, would you like to conclude with which opportunities or issuers excite you most right now?
I have a few. I'm not allowed to personally talk about the individual issuers, and I don't give out stock tips. Though I have talked to friends about which companies I've seen and which operations I like more, and which operations I like less. So,
so which of all of the emerging subsegments and opportunities within the cannabis complex, which general segments do you think are more attractive than others?
Yeah, I like the companies that are coming online and doing something a little bit differently, partnering with somebody new, basically from a university or whatever, really looking at breaking down the whole growing operation process and trying something different. So not just putting plants in a bed like this and putting light on it and letting it grow and seeing how much they can produce out of that one patch, and then going through the usual drying process and the usual extraction process. I think that is a way of the past, and every one of the companies needs to be looking forward on how they're going to be producing more efficiently, creating more product in a smaller space. And there are so many companies that are very, very specific to doing that rather than doing the traditional way. So I don't really care about the size of the acreage that you have anymore. It's really how much plant can you produce out of that acreage, right? And whether or not you got to stack it on 3 levels and move it forward from there. So companies that are really took a big step backwards on production and are moving things forward in a new designed way of doing things, I think are going to be sort of the way of the future. And we're going to see a lot more of those companies compete with the traditional producers.
All right. Your insight is bang on as usual. Really appreciate it. We'll come back to you soon. Thanks for joining me, Steve.
James, thanks so much for having me again.